This presentation of the Savage Nation is brought to you by Inheritance Funding Company.
On the air, online, and on the go. This is Talk 910 KNEW.
Warning. The Michael Savage Show contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation. Here is Michael Savage.
The leftist media has been all over the case of Henry Louis Gates, Jr., a black college teacher who was legitimately suspected of breaking into his own house in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He was going in through a window. Someone called the police. Now, it turned out that although Professor Gates was simply trying to get into his own house, the neo-Marxist anti-white media has made this into the worst thing since slavery. Cries of racism are echoing across the media landscape. Of course, this is to help Obama. And yet when I, Michael Savage, a white conservative radio broadcaster, have been discriminated against by an entire nation, there is no one in the midstream media who will stand up and defend me. What does that tell you? The bottom line is this. None of the empty suits and empty skirts are willing to criticize a black college professor who verbally abused a police officer before he was arrested because they're afraid of being called a racist. And there is no one in the leftist media who is willing to take up the cause of Michael Savage for fear of being called a rabid right-winger. So we now know that the British government, in spite of acknowledging that Jackie Smith's policy of a name and shame list, which included me, Michael Savage, on a list of terrorists and real murderers, we now know they've refused to reverse the ban on my coming into their nation. And on this side of the Atlantic, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has refused to lift a finger to take any action to have me, an American citizen, removed from this damn list. So what's the next step? Well, we need you to call upon the few conservative members of Congress, if indeed there are any left, to get a letter-writing campaign to Hillary Clinton and President Obama and demand that they exert pressure on the British government to have my name removed from that list of murderers. If no action is taken, if no letters are written, if even the most so-called conservative representatives, can you name any, and senators, refuse to take action at that point, then we will know for sure that we are without any representation whatsoever. The reason you're tuning into the Savage Nation is because of the fact that on Saturday night, there was a story that appeared in Britain saying that the ban on Michael Savage, in essence, you think it said that had been lifted. That Michael Savage's name has been lifted from the banned in the UK list. Well, that's not what the article said. It is not at all what the article said. Some reports in the United States, based on the piece in the Daily Mail on Sunday morning that the ban on Michael Savage had been lifted, are untrue. The article doesn't say that at all. But I want to back up and tell you that I am heartened to a certain extent by the movement in this direction. What happened Saturday night was this. And incidentally, you can read the article on michaelsavage.com. Those of you near a computer, go to it. You can't find it anywhere else. Let me give you the background on this. Saturday night, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. Michael is having a vodka and grapefruit juice. Michael is pondering the view of San Francisco Bay. Michael is thinking about things. Phone rings. Joe Farah, his friend and colleague from WorldNet Daily, says, "Have you seen the article that was just posted?" Michael's heart thumped. He said, "Oh, God, no, more bad news." I said, what, more bad news? He said, no. He said, they're dropping the list of those banned from traveling to the UK, including you and including everyone else on the list, including the Hamas murderers. I said, well, okay, that's not a good sign, but at least I'm free. He said, well, what are your reactions? Here were my reactions. to Joe Farris Saturday night. 1, I am stunned. 2, I'll believe it when I see it. And 3, I want a letter of apology. Those are exactly my positions right now. But as a matter of fact, many of my friends and colleagues sent me emails congratulating me, saying, Savage, you struck a great blow for freedom of speech. Thanks for fighting. Thanks for having the fortitude. Thanks for standing up to to Jackie Smith. Thank you for getting your name off the list and for standing for freedom of speech, even for liberals who you detest and who detest you. I wish it was all true. I wish I could say we're going to celebrate today, but we can't celebrate quite yet because we haven't seen it in writing. All we saw was a report from the Daily Mail that said that the Home Secretary ditches least wanted list as a blunder. That was the article. The way it was reported on the Drudge Report was a little different. Savage travel ban lifted by UK. He's free to travel to England. Well, I don't know if I'm free. I've been invited to give a big speech there, I believe by one of the major debating societies at one of the major universities. I had not intended to go to England. I might go to England if the ban is lifted. And they'll find out that I'm a very humane, sane man who is concerned about not only freedom of speech for myself, but for my political opposition, and also for the threats to the survival of Western nations owing to radical Islam and the inroads being made by radical Islamists in Britain, the United States, France, and Germany. Those are facts of reality. There's nothing new in what I have said. And so over the weekend, as I said, the British newspaper, the Daily Mail, reports that Home Secretary Alan Johnson, who is the man who replaced Jackie Smith, is planning to end the policy of, quote, naming and shaming people banned from Britain. This does not mean that I, Michael Savage, have been taken off England's ban list. It does not mean that I have been taken off a list which includes murderers and terrorists. Doesn't mean that at all. But I think that the British government understands that Jackie Smith was a loose cannon, whatever. Putting my name on the list was a gimmick, and making it impossible for me to travel to Britain was a huge mistake for the people of Britain and for the government of the Labour Party. And so they're on the right track. But it really is about you. It's about a case of one man and my devoted audience of listeners who would not be intimidated, would not be bullied, and would not go gentle into that good night. Yeah, I was banned by a major Western country. I still may be banned. I don't know. But this is a fight that I and my listeners have been waging. Now, there are some in the media who realize the threat to freedom of speech and spoke out about my case over the last 3 months. You know, I look in my yard right now, and my tomatoes are coming up, in the fruits now are red. And the pears are starting to become ripe. This whole thing started when I put the seedlings in the ground. You say, well, it's only 3 months. It's been 3 months of hell. 3 months of hell. 3 months of fearing that next I'd be banned in another country, then another country, then another country, and I'd wind up a man without a country. And I believe that this has been orchestrated by the United States government in the Obama administration because they would never do a frontal assault on talk radio. Instead, they try to use me as a canary in the mine shaft to see what would happen by going around the back door and trying to defame me with sound bites taken out of context. There were some in the media who realized the threat to freedom of speech and spoke out about my case. Hosts such as Laura Ingraham, Rusty Humphries, and Jerry Doyle spoke out strongly in my defense. Even Bill O'Reilly, my antagonist, though he did it grudgingly, spoke out against my being banned from England and what it really meant. But there are others who are the real ones who should be named and shamed. Here in the United States, where was the U.S. State Department? Where was the so-called Defender of Liberties, the ACLU, when we needed them? And what about those conservatives in the media who wrapped themselves in the flag, who said nothing? Well, I'll let you decide. I'll be right back.
Don't make a difficult time tougher. If your inheritance is stuck in probate, we can advance you the cash you need in as little as 72 hours. Visit inheritancefunding.com or call 877-YOU-AIR. That's 877-YOU-HEIR.
Your money, your life. How to make sense of it all. I'm Rob Black. Join me weekday mornings at 10 on Talk 910 KNEW.
Last summer, I wrote Psychological Nudity, which were all of my radio stories, One Armed Frank, etc. I'm going to take requests of which story you would like me to read to you of the Michael Savage radio story list, the playlist. For a little bit before we get back to politics. I'll read one. Here's one. I like Walter Cronkite and Purgatory of Manhood by Cyanide. So here's what I wrote. Who did I actually like in mainstream news? Let me just run on this for a minute. I did like Walter Cronkite because he had a deep voice and a mustache. He reminded me of an Italian dentist that I knew in the Bronx. You always had to behave yourself when you were around guys with mustaches like that because they could do weird things to you if you didn't. Cronkite was a very authoritative man, and how he presented the world is how I thought the world was. I might be eating steak and French fries and cherry vanilla ice cream on a TV tray, building up my negative cardiac profile while Dad was working. I'd be watching Cronkite. I had no idea what he was talking about.